With the end of January comes a somber anniversary. January 28, 2023 marks the 37th anniversary of the Challenger disaster. The space shuttle broke apart in a burst of flame, killing all 7 crew members on board. Benita Zahn spoke to family and friends of one of the crew members killed.
In the quiet town of Mohawk, there is disbelief and shock tonight, because one of their own was on board the ill-fated shuttle. He was 41-year-old Gregory Jarvis, a Hughes Aircraft electrical engineer who beat out more than 600 other engineers to land a seat on the shuttle.
It's just one hell of a guy. He was a kind of a guy that he was always the last guy in. You know, he's the last. The profile was low. He never wanted to be in any track. He wanted everybody else to have the show, and he couldn't be beaten at anything.
Jarvis graduated Mohawk Central School in 1962. He was a football player, manager of the basketball team, and a friend to his high school physics teacher.
I knew that he was going to be a good engineer. I knew that he would do well his job, but, you know, I didn't envision him as being one of the outstanding people that I've taught.
Whitebread remembers meeting Jarvis shortly after he was tapped to be an astronaut.
He was ecstatic, just on cloud 9.
And he never voiced any apprehensions, not even at the last minute. On Sunday, Jarvis spoke with his stepfather for the last time.
You know, they were all taught safety, and the men had so much confidence in what was going on. None of them were fearful of anything happening on that ship.
Benita Zahn, the 30-Minute News, Mohawk.
People gathered to pray and find solace after the disaster. Services were dedicated to the Challenger crew. Flags were also lowered to half staff across the country.
It was somehow ironic and appropriate that this day for prayers for the Challenger crew coincides with Catholic School Week. Probably no one could identify more with one of the astronauts than students and teachers. Krista McAuliffe was a teacher who would have beamed back a lesson from space.
For the repose of the souls of the men and women who lost their lives in Challenger 7 accident, and for the consolation of their families, let us pray to the Lord.
The public will never forget watching Challenger lift off on its fateful flight. It was a mission that promised much, but was tragically cut short.
Krista McAuliffe was a religious education teacher in her parish. And while we pay tribute to her and to the other men and women who lost their lives, and we also remind ourselves that they have helped us to perform the greatest task of our Christianity, to pass on our faith.
And while the nation remembers the Challenger crew in churches across the land today, the message is also one of looking to the future.
That the knowledge and experience gained through the sacrifices and endeavors of the men and women engaged in space exploration be used for the good of all mankind. Let us pray to the Lord.
Steve Scoville, the 30-Minute News.
The disaster was hard for everyone to watch and absorb, but maybe especially for children. Schools tried to tackle it head-on. Chris Bruner reports.
I think most of us saw at least once or twice or 3 times the explosion.
7th grade science teacher Bill DeZamba, like all his colleagues here at Cohoes Middle School, wasn't going to try to duck this lesson. And according to a school psychologist, the way to deal with the shock and disbelief is to get the children to talk about it.
Some children will have to will keep it within themselves, and we have to give them vehicles by which they can express their feelings that must come out.
What caused the explosion, in your mind? Ivan?
I think it was like something leaking out of it.
You thought something?
Like the experts, these young people are pondering the theories and wondering if somehow it could have all been avoided.
It wouldn't have been as bad for everybody if they would have expected it, because they think it's like foolproof. They think that nothing like that could happen.
And there was sympathy for students of Krista McAuliffe, who watched their teacher die so suddenly and so violently.
I feel sorry for the kids at their school because they were watching TV and watching them go off, and they were all partying, and then when they blew up, they all stopped partying. Some went into shock and stuff.
I felt sorry for the people in it, but I think it was kind of weird because it's never happened before.
The talking wasn't going to change history, but it could give the students here the knowledge that their feelings were shared by all. Chris Bruner, the 30-Minute News, Cohoes.
And the science community tried to figure out exactly what went wrong. Mike Moran reported from RPI with how NASA learned from disasters before.
The tragedy in 1967 led to a thorough investigation of the accident, and it was discovered that there was a problem with the materials used in the Apollo capsule. RPI professor Martin Glicksman is a NASA advisor who has studied that accident. He says what NASA learned in the aftermath made future flights safe.
The accident never repeated again. NASA has been always on guard to avoid any materials which can contribute to such a fire accident. I believe when they uncover the cause of today's accident, steps will be taken to ensure that it does not repeat.
RPI professor Robert Doremus agrees that the shuttle program will be halted until NASA knows what caused this tragedy and how to prevent a reoccurrence. Doremus had a personal link to this flight. He had an experiment that was supposed to be on board, but was bumped to make room for Krista McAuliffe. As a result, the news came as a terrible shock to him. But from his experience with NASA, Doremus says he believes every possible safety precaution was taken.
I think what everyone should realize is that NASA has been super cautious and extremely careful in all of the flights that have anything to do with humans. In fact, sometimes both the media and the experimenters have been irritated by this.
Mike Moran, the 30-Minute News, Troy.
The ultimate cause of the disaster was an O-ring seal in one of the solid fuel rockets. It didn't seal properly due to the cold temperature at launch time. This caused redesigns on future missions. For more of our News Vault coverage of other major events, head to the News Channel 13 YouTube page, click on News Vault. Opening News Vault 13, I'm Rachel Teedy.